Karen thinks cutting hair makes her a scientist. I work for a company that's currently looking to fill one of our scientist roles. A woman I know wants the job, but I had to explain to her that her experience as a hairstylist did not qualify her for a single job at our company, let alone this one. I had no reason to think that wouldn't be the end of it, but she just keeps insisting anyway. I know this sounds wild as heck, and I'm pretty sure I'm in the right, but my opponent is insistent, so I wanted to make sure I was in the right. So I work for a materials company. To not get too specific, I'll just say our company's research involves synthesis and characterization of materials containing transition metals from a micromolar to large scale. The company is currently looking for a research scientist. The requirements for the job are a PhD in a relevant area of study, a Master of Science with some industry experience, or a bachelor's with a freak ton of experience. It's not an entry-level job. I made a comment on social media about my company looking for someone to fill this role. A friend, Stella, reached out to me and asked about the job. She specifically asked me to recommend her to my boss for the position. I was surprised. Unfortunately, Stella would not qualify even if it was an entry-level position. I told Stella that, sadly, she doesn't have the credentials. My company would not even consider her. I tried to put it nicely. She got upset and told me that, because she's a hairstylist, she understands chemistry fully. We went back and forth multiple times. I was always polite, just stating that she unfortunately does not have the credentials for this job, and I could not recommend her. She said I was being unreasonable. I then explained to her, because she would not quit, that this job includes duties such as characterization via electron diffraction and X-ray diffraction techniques, as well as synthesis of materials. Not only to perform them, but to understand them. And to understand these concepts, one would have to at least know about chemical states, chemical equilibria, acid and base, redox reactions, chemical kinetics, atomic bonding, and some quantum chemistry. Stuff that is only somewhat covered in undergraduate chemistry. This is not an easy role. She admitted that she didn't take chemistry of that level, but said it doesn't matter because she could pick it up during training. I don't know how one could pick up a PhD's worth of knowledge during 2 months of training, but I'll let my colleagues know their education was for nothing. I'm sorry, but I would not be taken seriously at my job anymore if I recommended her. I told her she's free to apply by herself and explain her knowledge to HR, but I will not be sending in my personal recommendation for her. I wouldn't expect her to recommend me to her salon as an expert hairstylist without any experience just because I can cut paper with scissors, so I don't know why she wants me to recommend her to a job that requires credentials she doesn't have. She's now calling me a jerk and has been for the past 1.5 weeks, stating I'm disrespectful to hairstylists. I don't think that's the case, but am I the jerk? For whatever it's worth, this original poster's line about cutting paper with scissors is definitely why Stella thinks he doesn't respect hairstylists. I get the analogy, and I also get the frustration of having to answer the same question repeatedly without being heard, but the tone of it sounds a bit ego-driven. Ironically, it's possible that it should be taken the opposite way, that out of respect for hairstylists, it wouldn't be fair to apply to a salon without credentials. But when it comes on the heels of another sarcastic line, I can see where it was misinterpreted. While it doesn't sound like OP's the jerk here, I don't think his friend is actively trying to be a jerk either. It sounds like she might be grossly overestimating her abilities, or possibly underestimating how difficult this job would be. But it does make me want to see a movie where a hairstylist gets a job as a chemist and rocks the science world. It would basically be The Big Bang Theory meets Legally Blonde. If this woman's story can inspire somebody to make that movie, then she's not a Karen, she's a hero. My entire family thinks my 7-year-old nephew is a criminal. I'm married to my wife, Ella. We have 3 children together. Our son is 7, and our daughters are 4 and 2. A few months ago, we learned Ella's sister had a child, and that her child had been removed from the home. Ella was contacted about taking in her nephew Dex, who's also 7. Despite the shock, and despite us not knowing the nephew, we chose to bring him into our home in an effort to give him the life Ella and her sister did not have. I never expected us taking her nephew in to be a problem, but my family were vocal about us not taking him in. This is where I should mention that I'm black and my wife is white. Our kids together are dark-skinned like me. Dex is white like my wife. Ella's sister, Dex's mom, was involved in illegal activities, which contributed to Dex's removal. My family acted as though Dex was somehow responsible and doomed, and they told me it was selfish to bring him into a house with my children, who will always get the blame for his actions. I was angry. Dex is 7. Our kids love him, and he's already bonded so well with them. He's little, but they treat him like a criminal. They refuse to include him in the family. They told me he would not be welcome at family events. So I chose to cut my family out of my life. I told them I would not turn my back on a child who is nobody else, who has done nothing to deserve abandonment. One of my nephews is 15, and he got in touch with me recently to talk. He said he missed me and his cousins, and he hated that we didn't see each other. I told him I missed him too. I explained that adult issues were complicated sometimes, and hopefully we could see each other soon. He told me I could see them, that if I kicked Dex out, we could see each other again. He told me that Dex is in trouble and that he doesn't deserve to tear our family apart. I told him Dex is a child who has nobody else. He told me Dex is going to be the reason my kids end up in jail, and maybe even me too. I told him that was ridiculous. He told me I was being dumb, and it was embarrassing to watch. He then said, F Dex, he doesn't matter. That's when I snapped. I told him I was ashamed of how he was talking about an innocent kid, and I was just as ashamed of the rest of the family who would put so much on a 7-year-old child. I told him I would not dump Dex for them, and it only added to how ashamed I was to have them request that repeatedly. My nephew ended the call, and straight after, I got a message from my sister that I had no right to talk to her child that way. Then the rest of the family joined in, and I can't stop asking myself if it was wrong to say this to my nephew, who is a 15-year-old kid. I ask myself if ending the call would have been better because dumping on a kid is perhaps not my finest moment. Am I the jerk? I'm not actually sure where this OP was out of line. He didn't dump on a kid. He scolded a teenager who's old enough to know better than to hold insane resentments against a small child. For anyone who thinks there's info missing from this story, OP explains in the comments that the mom's crimes are related to illegal substances. So this whole family thinks that Dex will be affected by this and wind up dealing himself. The very concept of a 7-year-old being accused of dealing honestly sounds more like something you'd see in a South Park episode than in real life. The difference is that if this were South Park, the kid would probably be guilty. It's ridiculous to ever stigmatize a child because of the actions of the parent, yet it happens all the time, and we even see it a lot on Reddit. If a parent acts entitled, you can usually bet their child will be called the same, despite remaining silent through an entire story. That said, aspects of this story sound potentially fake, like the way OP shoehorns in the race differences, yet never brings them up again. A lot of rage bait has an agenda, usually to prove that minorities can be bigots too. Most people know that, and very few argue against it, but there's a weird number of people who feel the need to prove it anyway. On the other hand, the family worrying they could be blamed for another's actions due to their skin color does sound realistic. What do you think? Real or fake? Let us know in the comments whether you believe this story or not, and why. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. Entitled couple tries to steal my cat. I'm friends with Ed. He has a girlfriend, Helen, who lives with him and his parents due to her mom kicking her out. I'm not very close with Helen, but I do see her as a mutual friend. I worked my back off to buy my first house back in 2021 so I can keep all my cats. I own 3 of them, and my mom is mildly allergic, so I need my own house. Anyways, Ed asked me if him and his girlfriend can come over to hang out. Once they got here, Helen immediately went straight for my cats, which is fine, my cats love the attention. But it progressively got weird when she asked me if she could have one of them, especially Ash, my Savannah cat. If you don't know, Savannah cats are very rare to find, especially in Texas, and only certain countries allow you to own them. But Helen went on to explain how Ed's parents don't like cats and how she wants to own one of these cats. I immediately shut her down and told her my cats are not for sale. I explained to her that I worked hard to get my hands on these cats. Right after that, she started complaining to Ed right in front of me about how it's not fair that she can't own a cat, and about how privileged I am to have a good-paying job. I reminded her again that I haven't even received my associate degree yet, and I'm working hard to be where I'm at. She threw another fuss, and things got awkward afterwards, but soon she asked Ed to leave. As she was leaving, she asked me if I could grab her a bottle of water, and as soon as I turned around, she was literally gone. I was confused, but oh well. About 10 minutes passed by, and I was going to feed my cats when I realized Ash, my Savannah cat, was missing. At first, I thought she was hiding, but I realized she wasn't anywhere in my house or the backyard. I immediately called Ed and asked him if Helen took my cat. He did confirm, and I quote, "Yes, Helen has Ash. She started following Helen to the car and jumped in, and Helen didn't notice until we got on the freeway. We're basically home, so we'll return your cat tomorrow. I don't feel like driving back." This ticked me off because Savannah cats aren't small at all. Like, you must be blind not to notice a 2-foot cat in your car. I immediately told him to return Ash to me or I would be calling the police. And I'm assuming he thought I was bluffing because he said, "Chill out, Helen knows how to take care of cats pretty well." I immediately hung up and called the police and gave them Ed's address. To sum up, the police showed up at Ed's house and told them to either return my cat or be reported for theft. About 20 minutes later, Ed was at my door, shoving Ash into my arms and calling me a jerk. He claimed I don't trust him or Helen and that I'm being greedy. But now that I'm thinking about it, I feel kind of bad. Maybe it was just an accident and I was overreacting. Am I the jerk? Update 1. I went back to the station to formally press charges against her. And yes, all my cats have chips and collars with their names, address, and allergies. To add on, my grandma got my Savannah cat for me 3 years ago, but she was definitely not cheap at all, almost around $11,000. Update 2. My house was passed on to me from my grandparents. Wait, I'm confused. Early in the story, OP said that she worked really hard to buy her house and get this cat. Then in the edits, she says she got both these things from her grandmother, and the house at least was inherited. The only way for both versions of this story to be real is if OP bumped off her own grandma, and apparently it took a lot of work. But she needed a house for her cats, so I guess at that point you just do what you've got to do. Even if it weren't for that glaring detail, the cat theft makes no sense. While OP tries to make the friend's story sound ridiculous, OP's story doesn't sound much better. She turns her back, and this girl immediately vanishes with a giant cat in tow. And from what I've read, Savannah cats can get pretty rowdy if they're manhandled by anyone they don't trust. But despite all of these details that don't line up, Redditors are still convinced that this happened. They've even gone as far as to assume the couple planned on selling the cat and that they already had a buyer lined up. These details appeared nowhere in the story. Sometimes I wonder if Reddit knows that half of what they read is fiction and they're just trying to involve themselves in the storytelling. In which case, I have to admire the dedication. Crazy sister-in-law throws herself a baby shower for my babies. I and my sister-in-law have been struggling with infertility. We both have endometriosis. Mine isn't nearly as severe as hers, but after 4 years of trying, I'm now pregnant with 2 healthy baby girls. My sister-in-law called me last week to tell me that we should have a baby shower to welcome in our new babies. When I asked her what that meant, she said her and her husband were thinking about adopting one or both of our babies. I told her I absolutely was not giving my babies to anyone. She said, "Okay, I understand," and laughed. I asked her if it was a joke, and she told me it was just a prank, and we laughed it off. My husband later gets a call from my sister-in-law about a very small gathering that they're having. When my husband asks what it is, my sister-in-law says it's a surprise, and to not bring me, since it's a family-only gathering. My sister-in-law begged my husband not to bring me, and he said he wouldn't, but he still brought me. We get to my mother-in-law's house and see a huge sign that says, "Welcoming our new babies." It had both our babies' names on it, but with my sister-in-law's last name. I was furious. All of my in-laws were there, and my sister-in-law's husband's family were there, and tons of baby gifts. I asked my sister-in-law what the Funko Pop was going on, and why is she having a party to welcome my babies? She told me they weren't my babies because I agreed to give both my kids to her. At that point, I knew what she told me on the phone wasn't a joke. She even had a sash that said "Mom-to-be." I grabbed a glass of wine that was left on the table and poured what was left of it on her. My in-laws are saying my behavior was completely uncalled for, and that I should have respected my sister-in-law's wishes for me to stay home. In-laws are also saying I need to pay for a new dress for my sister-in-law so that she can try to have a peaceful baby shower since I ruined her day. Am I the jerk for pouring wine on her? I can't lie. I live for these stories where OP is clearly in the right, yet the entire family sides against them anyway. These people not only attended a shower for a woman who was openly planning to steal her sister's babies, but they even went through the trouble of buying gifts for it. In my head, the whole family knows the sister is nuts, but she just throws one heck of a party. Like, sure, it's not great that she's proudly declared herself a baby thief, but have you seen the chocolate fountain? With all that said, the OP is slightly a jerk. Her anger was justified, but it sounds like that was somebody else's wine. Why shouldn't they get to finish their drink just because they bought a onesie for a baby napper? Major party foul, OP. And if the sarcasm isn't clear, I have major doubts about this story. There's been a huge uptick in stories about crazy infertile women lately, but this is the first one where the whole family supports it. Seems a little over the top. But what do you think? If this is real, how would you handle the situation? Is there any way to handle a situation this insane? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and whether there was a better way for OP to handle it. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.